Hi, Russ Miller here. My friends at Mapex Drums and at Sweetwater asked me to discuss the new Mapex Black Panther Design Lab series of snares. And we have 4 models coming from Mapex for the Design Lab snares. I have 3 of them here. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Design Lab and its concept, what it is, and then of course some details about these 3 instruments. So the Mapex Design Lab is a brand new sect of Mapex drums that is based upon very high level instruments, very high-end professional level instruments, and it's focused on what we call sonic concepts. So what that means is we take a very specific sound or idea of what the drum should be, and we try to make this instrument do that at its highest level. So one of the things we use to do that is called a concept hybrid. Now, Mapex was one of the first companies to use hybrid shells, meaning multiple materials together in the same composition or the same shell. And we're using that same hybrid sort of focus point for the sonics as well. So we'll take a concept hybrid, and it might be, let's say, classic, articulate, and bright, those 3 things together. And we use a tremendous amount of science in the R&D, everything from the Janka scale of wood hardness to advanced testing with the sonic clear type bearing edges with different angles and how they're presented even on different sides of the drums. And there's a ring technology involved, and of course the selection of the proper heads, hoops, and the way that the shell composition is put together itself. Sometimes it's hybrid shells, sometimes it's pure woods, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of effort, a lot of technology, a lot of science, and of course a lot of artistry involved in making one of these instruments. And you're going to see a tremendous amount of stuff coming from Mapex Design Lab. The first offerings, though, are these 4 snare drums. There's 2 sizes for this one, that's why there's 4. And I want to tell you about them here in detail. So this first drum here is called the Equinox Snare, and the concept hybrid for this snare is classic, articulate, and bright. Now you're looking at an all maple shell, and it's got reinforcement rings top and bottom, 4-ply reinforcement rings that are maple, so you end up with an 11-ply shell at the top of the drum. And that gives you a nice woody fat sound to the backbeats, but because of the sonic clear 45-degree edge on top and 35-degree edge on the bottom, it has a very small, precise, and articulate snare sound, especially in the center of the drum. And one of the other things you're going to look at and see immediately on this instrument is that it has single flanged hoops on top, and that's a single flange design with a claw. It's got a classic look to it, and these are actually chrome over copper weighted hoops. So the weight of that hoop actually dries up the ambience and the overtones on the drum a little bit, and that helps with the articulation as well. So the classic, articulate, and bright, and you're going to see that in the look of the drum and the sound of the drum. Staggered lugs to expand the tuning range, and it's got a satin black finish. And one of the things we talk about with the Design Lab series of instruments is what's called the sonic clear attenuation system. Now you're going to hear and see that a lot through Mapex designs, but the first incarnation of the SAS, or sonic clear attenuation system, is the finishes on these drums. And if you're not familiar with what the finish does to the sound of the instrument, it's very important. So we actually give the finishes SAS ratings. This is an SAS level 0 rating. That means that this hand-rubbed black satin finish has 0 effect on the sound of the drum. It does not affect the sound. You could have an SAS 1, which means it might have a thick gloss lacquer on it, or an SAS 2, which means it has a veneered extra ply with a gloss lacquer, or even a 3, which means it was wrapped with a plastic drum wrap. So all of those affect the sound of the drum. Sometimes they're used in a positive way to help attenuate the sound, but we want to make sure that everybody understands that, and that's what the SAS finish attenuating system is about. So it's a SAS level 0 on the finish, and I'll just play this. It comes with a FiberSkin 3 Diplomat, great head for brushes, and you're going to hear how articulate the drum is in the center, but it has nice bright attack to it. It's sort of the classic snare drum sound, you know, the Buddy Rich, the classic snare drum sound that we all loved and grew up on. So here's what it sounds like. So you hear the brightness of the maple shell, but it's very controlled sound. You know, there's no extra snare flutter, no extra snare buzz. That's due to the way that the snare beds are cut, and that's because it also ships with a pure sound P1416 snare element, very high-end snare on the bottom of the drum. Next up, we have the Heartbreaker, another Design Lab series snare, and the concept hybrid for Heartbreaker is dark, rustic, and throaty. So that to me is the classic rock, let's say the Phil Rudd with AC/DC style snare drum sound. It's got bottom, but it's got that throaty sort of punch to it, especially has a feel when you hit it. That's really important. To achieve that, we went with an all mahogany shell. So you have an 8-ply mahogany shell with 4-ply mahogany reinforcement rings top and bottom. So you end up with 12 plies of mahogany at the bearing edge. Those are Sonic Clear bearing edge 45s. And it has an extra deep snare bed on it to help get a little bit more controlled sound out of the snares, but it's very clean, very fat, very throaty sound. Sonic Clear hoops, double venting, so there's 2 vents on it, and it has the Saturn series style full-bodied lug on it, and that helps to attenuate the shell a little bit as well with a full-bodied lug on there. So again, that classic rock snare drum sound, and we're going for the execution of that at a very high level. So this is what the Heartbreaker sounds like. You can hear how dry that is, and because of the Ambassador head, the Ambassador X head that ships on it, the Remo Ambassador X, it is a little bit thicker head, helps dry up some of those overtones, but it has a really fat, throaty feel to it that really fills up and takes up a lot of sonic space. So that's the Heartbreaker. Then we have, in the Design Lab series, the Cherry Bomb drums. Now, there's 2 of these. There's a 5.5 by 13 and a 6 by 14. So we don't have the 13 here, but it's the same composition of this drum, just a different size. Okay, cherry wood, soft wood, lower fundamental. It's dark, it's dry, it's great for a vintage style tone. And the concept hybrid for the Cherry Bomb is actually controlled, vintage, and precise. So it's a controlled sound. It has no extra flutters or buzzes like the classic. I love the classic, you know, vintage sounds like the old Radio Kings from the 30s and 50s. But they always had a little bit of buzz and flutters in there. The snare bed depth and the way that the edges are cut on these cleans those sort of things up. So we end up with that classic vintage tone, but it's controlled and precise and clean. You know, we're looking at like the Eagles, Don Henley style snare drum sound here, and to execute that in a newer drum with modern hardware is very important. You know, again, I love the vintage sound, but dealing with vintage hardware is sometimes a drag. So it's great to have that sort of tone available, but with a modern instrument like this. All maple 8-ply cherry shell, 45 degrees, top and bottom. Extra deep snare bed, so 2.7 millimeter depth on the snare bed, and that's what, again, makes it a precise vintage sound. The Sonic Savor hoops are inward bent stick saver style 3 millimeter sort of heavier hoops. So that inward bend focuses the sound downward and not outward and creates the punch of a vintage tone. And it's double air vented cylinder throw offs. Now this particular drum is outfitted with tube lugs on it, whereas these are full-bodied Saturn lugs. And this lug lets the cherry open up and get a lot of character from the wood because it's just small pointed bolts through there in 2 positions rather than having the whole lug on the drum to attenuate the sound. So here's what the Cherry Bomb sounds like in the 6 by 14 version. The Cherry Bomb ships with the Remo Ambassador X head, a little bit thicker head, as like the Heartbreaker does, and that again adds to that sort of compression punch that's on the top. And you can hear it's that classic vintage tone with the precision and control of a modern instrument. So the Mapex Black Panther Design Lab series of professional snare drums. We have 4 models, the 13 and the 14 in the Cherry Bomb, the 14x6 Heartbreaker, 5.5x14 Equinox. And you can get more information about Mapex Design Lab by talking to your personal sales engineer here at Sweetwater. And I'm Russ Miller. We'll see you guys out on the road.